It was supposed to be a perfect afternoon. The kind of afternoon money could buy, where every detail had been planned weeks in advance, and nothing was left to chance. The sun shone brightly in a cloudless sky, casting golden reflections across a massive luxury mansion on the edge of the city. Tall palm trees lined the property, and beyond them sat a private pool club reserved entirely for one special occasion: a birthday party. Not just any birthday party, but the 10th birthday of Ethan Hale, the only son of billionaire entrepreneur Richard Hale. The pool water shimmered like glass, so clear and blue it looked unreal. Soft music played from hidden speakers. Long tables were filled with expensive food no child could pronounce, and servers in crisp uniforms moved silently through the crowd. Laughter floated through the air, light and careless. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like a dream. But dreams don't always feel safe for everyone. Near the edge of the pool, a small boy stood completely still. That boy was Ethan. Ethan Hale was 10 years old, but he looked smaller than most kids his age. He wore noise-cancelling headphones, slightly tilted off one ear, and gripped a tiny red toy car so tightly his knuckles had turned pale. His eyes darted around the pool area, taking in every sound, every movement, every splash. Ethan was autistic. Loud noises made his chest tighten. Sudden movements felt like attacks. Bright reflections from the water made his head spin. And the pool, the deep, endless pool, terrified him more than anything else in the world. While other kids ran barefoot across the hot tiles, screaming and laughing as they jumped into the water, Ethan stayed exactly where he was. He rocked gently back and forth, whispering to himself, counting under his breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. The toy car was his anchor, his safe thing. Across the pool, his father watched. Richard Hale stood among powerful guests, investors, celebrities, politicians, all smiling and chatting, as if nothing in the world could ever go wrong. But Richard wasn't listening to a single word they said. His eyes never left his son. He saw the way Ethan stiffened every time someone splashed into the pool. He saw the way Ethan flinched when music suddenly grew louder. He saw the way Ethan stood alone. Richard's heart ached. He loved his son more than anything he owned, and he owned almost everything. But love didn't always protect Ethan from a world that didn't understand him. Richard had told himself this party would be different. He had invited kids from school. He had made sure there were quiet areas. He had hired extra staff. He wanted Ethan to feel included. He wanted him to feel normal, even though he hated that word. Just try, Richard had whispered to Ethan earlier. You don't have to swim. Just be here. Ethan had nodded. But now, as minutes passed, the distance between Ethan and the other kids grew wider. Some children noticed him. At first, they just glanced. Ethan felt it. He always did. He kept his eyes down, his breathing shallow, trying to disappear into the background. But the whispers grew louder, the laughter sharper. What's wrong with him? One kid muttered. Why's he acting weird? Another asked. Ethan's fingers tightened around the toy car. His heart pounded. The noise around him began to blur together into one overwhelming roar. Then a boy stepped forward. He was taller than Ethan, louder, confident in the careless way children sometimes are when they don't understand consequences. He looked Ethan up and down, smirked, and glanced at his friends. Hey, the boy said, loud enough for others to hear. Does he even know how to swim? The group laughed. Ethan froze. Richard took a step forward, but he was too far away. The boy walked closer, standing right beside Ethan at the pool's edge. He leaned in, lowering his voice, cruel curiosity shining in his eyes. Let's see if he can swim. For a single second, time seemed to slow. Ethan turned his head slightly, confusion flickering across his face. His mind struggled to process the words, the tone, the sudden closeness. His body stiffened, every instinct screaming danger. Before anyone could react, before Richard could shout, before a single adult moved, Ethan was pushed. The splash was loud. Too loud. It echoed across the pool like a gunshot, cutting through the music, the laughter, the careless joy of the party. For a split second, everything went silent, like the world itself had taken a sharp breath. Then chaos erupted. Ethan vanished beneath the surface of the water. The clear blue pool that had looked so beautiful just moments earlier now felt dark and endless. His small body sank fast, dragged down by panic and confusion. The red toy car slipped from his fingers and floated helplessly on the surface, spinning slowly as if nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Under the water, Ethan's eyes were wide with terror. The world became muffled and distorted. Sounds blended together into a deep, terrifying hum. The water pressed against his ears, his chest, his throat. He tried to scream, but his mouth filled with water instead. His arms flailed wildly. His legs kicked without rhythm. But nothing worked. For Ethan, this wasn't just fear. This was overload. The sudden push. The cold water. The roaring noise. The bright light reflecting off the surface above him. His brain couldn't process did it shut down. He couldn't think. He couldn't understand what was happening. His body moved on instinct alone, but even that instinct was breaking apart. His movements became slower, weaker, more desperate. Above the water, people finally noticed. A woman screamed. Someone shouted, "Oh my God!" Another voice yelled, "Is that kid okay?" Parents rushed to the edge of the pool, hands flying to their mouths. Some pointed. Some panicked. Some froze, their minds struggling to catch up with what their eyes were seeing. No sound came out. Then he went under again. People shouted for a lifeguard. Someone yelled to call emergency services. Another guest leaned forward, then stepped back, fear stopping them from jumping in. Seconds passed. Long, terrifying seconds. And no one moved. Except one person. On the far side of the pool, away from the crowd, sat a girl wrapped in a faded towel. She had been quiet the entire afternoon, staying close to her mother, who worked as part of the event staff. She hadn't been invited as a guest. She wasn't wearing fancy clothes. No one had paid her much attention. Her name was Maya. Maya was 12 years old. She had seen Ethan long before the push. She noticed the way he stood alone. The way he rocked gently. The way he held his toy car like it was the most important thing in the world. She noticed because it felt familiar. At home, Maya had a little brother named Jamal. Jamal was autistic. She had seen the same movements. The same distant look when the world became too loud. The same panic when things changed too fast. She knew what sensory overload looked like, not from books, but from life. So when Ethan was pushed, Maya's heart dropped. When he disappeared under the water, her body reacted before her mind did. She stood up. The towel fell from her shoulders. Her mother turned and shouted, "Maya, wait!" But Maya wasn't listening. She was already running. Her bare feet slapped against the hot pool tiles as she sprinted forward. People barely noticed her at first. Their eyes were locked on the water, on the small boy struggling beneath the surface. Maya didn't hesitate. She didn't look for permission. She didn't wait for help. All she could see was Ethan, drowning, just like her brother would if no one helped him. As she reached the edge of the pool, she saw Ethan's hand break the surface one last time. Fingers trembling, reaching for nothing. Her chest tightened. "Hold on," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. Without thinking twice, Maya jumped. The water swallowed her instantly. Cold rushed over her skin, but she ignored it. She kicked hard, pushing herself toward Ethan's sinking body. Bubbles surrounded him. His movements were slowing now, his panic turning into exhaustion. Maya reached out. Her fingers brushed his arm. She grabbed him. And in that moment, just as the crowd gasped, just as Richard screamed his son's name again, everything was about to change. Maya didn't scream. She didn't panic. She didn't thrash or shout for attention like everyone else around the pool. The moment she entered the water, something inside her shifted, like a switch had flipped. The noise of the crowd faded into the background. The splashing, the yelling, the chaos above the surface didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was Ethan. He was right in front of her now. His eyes wide and unfocused, his body stiff with fear. His arms moved without control, slapping against the water as his legs kicked wildly. Their eyes met. Ethan didn't recognize her, not really. His brain was still trapped in overload. The water felt like an enemy. The light above felt too bright. His chest burned as his breathing came in sharp, broken gasps. But then, he saw her face. It wasn't scared. It wasn't angry. It wasn't rushed. It was calm. Maya opened her mouth and spoke slowly, carefully, knowing he couldn't hear her, but hoping he could understand her lips. "It's okay," she mouthed. She said it again. And again. "I'm here." Her hands moved gently, deliberately. She didn't grab Ethan's arms or pull him toward her chest. Instead, she guided one of his hands and placed it softly against her shoulder. Something solid. Something steady. Something real. Ethan's fingers curled instinctively into the fabric of her swimsuit. For the first time since he'd hit the water, he wasn't grabbing at nothing. He was holding on. Maya stayed still, letting him feel that she wasn't going anywhere. She adjusted her position slowly, careful not to surprise him. With her free arm, she supported his back, keeping his head above the surface. She began to hum. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a low, steady tune. The same tune she used every night at home. When her little brother Jamal felt overwhelmed. The same sound she used when the world became too much for him. When words stopped working. The humming vibrated softly through the water. Ethan felt it. His arms began to slow. The frantic splashing softened into smaller movements. His legs stopped kicking wildly. His grip on Maya's shoulder tightened, not in panic now, but in trust. Above the surface, the crowd watched in stunned silence. They expected chaos. They expected shouting. They expected struggle. Instead, they saw something unbelievable. A girl floating calmly on her back. A boy resting against her, his head above water. The water around them grew still. Ethan's breathing changed. From sharp gasps, to uneven breaths, to something closer to calm. His chest rose and fell more slowly. His eyes, once wild with terror, began to focus. He blinked, water dripping down his face, and looked at Maya again. She smiled at him. Just a little. "Good," she mouthed. "You're doing good." For the first time since he'd been pushed, Ethan wasn't afraid. He was safe. Lifeguards finally reached them, splashing into the pool with urgency and guilt written all over their faces. One of them moved to take Ethan from Maya, but she gently shook her head. "Slow," she said out loud now. "Please." The lifeguard hesitated, then nodded. Together, they moved carefully, lifting Ethan without rushing, without sudden movements. Maya stayed beside him the entire time, keeping a hand on his arm as they guided him toward the pool steps. When they reached the edge, strong hands helped Ethan out. The moment his feet touched solid ground, his knees buckled. Maya climbed out right behind him. She sat beside him on the warm tiles, still humming softly, still close. Richard Hale ran to his son, his heart pounding so hard it felt like it might tear through his chest. The world around him blurred as he pushed past stunned guests and shaken staff. The sounds of the party, the music, the chatter, the splashing, felt distant now, like echoes from another life. All he could see was Ethan sitting on the pool deck, water dripping from his hair, his small body wrapped in a towel. Richard dropped to his knees in front of him. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Daddy's here." He reached out, ready to pull his son into his arms, ready to feel him breathing, alive. But then Richard froze. Ethan wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He wasn't screaming or shutting down, the way he usually did, after something frightening. Instead, Ethan was calm. More than calm, he was focused. His eyes weren't locked on his father. They were fixed on someone else. Ethan's small hand was gripping another hand, tight, determined, as if letting go would break something precious. That hand belonged to Maya. Richard followed his son's gaze and truly saw her for the first time. She was soaked, her hair clinging to her face, her clothes dripping onto the marble tiles. She looked tired, her chest rising and falling with deep breaths. But there was no fear in her expression, only quiet concern for Ethan. The sight stunned him. All his wealth, all his influence, all his carefully designed plans, and the person who had saved his son, was a quiet girl no one had noticed. Around them, the party had collapsed into awkward silence. Parents whispered urgently to their children. Staff members stood frozen. Some guests avoided looking at Richard altogether, guilt written across their faces. A commotion stirred behind him. Richard turned just in time to see the boy who had pushed Ethan being led away by his parents. The child's face was pale now, his confidence gone. His mother apologized over and over, dragging him toward the exit, unable to meet Richard's eyes. But Richard didn't follow them. For once in his life, punishment wasn't the answer he was looking for. His focus returned to Ethan and to Maya. Richard knelt lower, bringing himself down to their level. He spoke slowly, carefully, the way doctors and therapists had taught him to speak to his son. "You're okay," he said softly. "You're safe." Ethan nodded slightly, still holding Maya's hand. Richard swallowed hard. Then he turned to Maya. His voice broke when he spoke. How did you know what to do?" The question wasn't just curiosity. It was awe. Maya looked up at him, surprised by his intensity. She hesitated for a moment, then shrugged, like the answer was obvious. "My brother is like him," she said quietly. "He's autistic too." Richard felt something tighten in his chest. Maya continued, her voice calm, steady. "When he gets scared, people try to grab him. They yell. They rush him. That makes it worse.